I use. I've been using it since about week 5 of the WP Builds podcast. Prior to that, I was using a conglomeration of different hacks using SoundCloud and all sorts of other various ways to make things work. And then in the end, I can't remember who showed me your platform, to be perfectly honest, but somebody did. And I was really pleased that they did, because now I can do everything from inside of WordPress. And basically my podcasts come out and I have to press a collection of buttons, and that's about it. It's dead simple. Craig is here to show you how all that works. So should we get your screen going, Craig?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here. And I think, like Nathan said, one of the real advantages of Castos over some other podcasting platforms is the ability to manage all of your podcast from one place. And for a lot of people, that is WordPress. And so what I'm going to do today is kind of walk through a little bit of what you see when you go to castos.com, just to get folks kind of oriented with kind of what the product is and what it does, and then walk through a lot of the beginning steps of how you get started with a podcast, and kind of all the way up to kind of being live. I will skip all of the, as Nathan knows, tedious and time-consuming parts of editing the audio, because that is probably not why a lot of folks are here, but a lot of questions that people have around, how do I get started with podcasting is not like, how do I record the audio and how do I edit it? We have a lot of resources on our website. If you go to castos.com/guide, we have like 20 videos that walk you through every little step of the whole process. And I'm going to walk through kind of a lot of the on-site technical parts of it today. And we'll leave folks to go to castos.com/guide to talk about theming your podcast and picking a name and who your audience is and audio editing and recording, how to talk about launching your podcast, things like that. But today we'll focus more on the nuts and bolts of how to get started. And for the WP Builds folks, specifically how to get started with our WordPress integration.
Okay.
So
do you mind if I just, before we begin, sorry, Craig, do you mind if I just briefly before we start, I'm sorry. Firstly, just to say, if you've got any questions, at the moment, you're probably looking at a screen with a white sidebar to the right, and it probably says chat, but next to it at the top, it'll say Q&A. So if at any point you've got a question, what we'll do is we'll just let Craig talk until he's well and truly finished, and then I'll pose those questions to him. So please put them in the Q&A tab. And also, can you just confirm, because I'm seeing Craig's screen, I can see Castos on there. I'm wondering if some nice person, one or two of you, wouldn't mind just writing yes or something, just to confirm that you can actually see that. That would be really helpful, just so that we know nobody's going to write yes. I presume it's working. There's plenty of people in here anyway, but they're not. Oh, yeah, somebody has. Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Danilo. Oh, Mike Little. I wonder if that's the Mike Little. I'd be delighted if it was. How exciting. Right, in which case I will turn off my camera, because you don't want to see me. Perhaps, Craig, shall we turn off our cameras and let your screen occupy?
Sure.
Oh, it says Mike Little. Yes, it is. Oh, I'm very excited.
Let's see. I will turn this back on and turn my camera
That's it.
off just for a moment. Sorry for the inception minute there that everybody saw, like the screen within the screen within the screen. Okay. And then Nathan, regarding questions, if I assume you'll be kind of monitoring the questions as folks have them that may seem like time sensitive or whatever. I can't see them as I'm presenting here. So if you have something that you think is particularly time sensitive, feel free to interrupt, and I'll kind of expound on whatever I was going through.
Okay, thank you. Will do.
Cool. So so this is our brand new website. We launched it on Monday. We're recording this is on Thursday. So our new Castos.com kind of homepage and marketing site is all in WordPress, of course, and built from the ground up with Gutenberg. And we're very proud of that. And it was a really fun and interesting experience. We'll be writing a blog post in the next week or so about this that we'll try and share in the WP Builds Facebook group. But we learned a lot in kind of building this new site in Gutenberg, for kind of like what is essentially a SaaS product. But when you come to the Castos site, kind of the big thing that Castos offers is basically podcast hosting. We also own and manage the Seriously Simple Podcasting WordPress plugin. And so you can find information about that on our site here. And really, this tagline here is kind of puts all this into one phrase as kind of WordPress podcast management made easy. And the goal really is to have one single place where you can manage all of your podcast content, just like you do all of the rest of your content, which is in your WordPress site. So as opposed to using something like Libsyn or SoundCloud, like Nathan mentioned, where you have to go publish in SoundCloud and schedule at the right time, and then create a post in WordPress and copy over an iframe and all this stuff. We kind of put everything into one place where you manage all of your content already, and then have your files hosted in a dedicated podcast hosting platform, which is what Castos is. So Seriously Simple Podcasting is the plugin that we own and maintain that integrates with the Castos hosting platform, and then Castos is kind of the big kind of brand that all this lays under. So I have two tabs open here where we're going to walk through kind of getting started and setting up your podcast. So this is the Castos dashboard. So when you create an account and log in, you'll come to a page that this would be empty, but it looks kind of like this. And the one thing that you need to do to kind of connect your WordPress site to your Castos account is with an API key. So under the My Account area and then Podcast Settings, you have this API key here. And I'll point out to begin with that Castos is, it started actually as a WordPress only tool. So you could only use the Castos hosting platform through the Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin. Since then, we've kind of expanded and made it to where you can use Castos as a standalone tool. But I think for this crowd, most folks will be using our WordPress integration. And we do ask you to kind of choose this up front so there's no confusion of like, if I publish something over here, will it sync over there and all this kind of stuff. So we just say you want to know where the kind of the nexus and the origin of your content is. And for most folks here, that will be, hey, I'm going to publish all of my stuff from WordPress. All of that is pushed, and we'll see that in just a minute, to the Castos platform in terms of hosting files and episodes and things like that. So once you've made this selection, just grab your API key and come back to your WordPress site. The Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin is already installed here. And we have a hosting tab in the podcast settings area where you just enter in the email address that you created your Castos account with, and then enter your API key here, and then validate and save your credentials. And that basically creates the connection between your WordPress site and your Castos dashboard. I'm going to pause and ask a question if I can. And folks can just give like a thumbs up or a yeah. How many folks are already podcasting or kind of familiar with kind of the general technology of how podcasting works?
That's me saying yes. So a few yeses, one from me, one from Mike Little.
Cool.
That's all we got.
Okay. So I'll give a real quick overview of kind of how podcasting works, and I think that will be helpful in kind of framing what we're doing here in terms of setting things up and what the pieces you need to get a podcast live. So all of podcasting really starts with the concept of the RSS feed. And the RSS feed, like a lot of WordPress folks can appreciate, is has a couple of pieces. One of those pieces is we call it channel information. So it has information about like the title of your podcast, a description, maybe you as the author, and for podcasting specifically, it has like an image that goes along with it. And so we represent all of these kind of meta pieces in this area of the plugin to where it says, okay, what's the title of your podcast? What categories do you want this to be in iTunes? And you can select all of these things here. The image you upload, and then it has a name and things like that. And the cool thing about what we've done when we connected our WordPress site to the Castos dashboard is if we come over here and update something, so we just added Podcast Hacker's default feed, whereas before in Castos it just says Podcast Hackers. Once we come in and update this feed, if all goes right and the webinar gods are smiling at me, this will update pretty much real time both in the feed that we see. So this is kind of coming from WordPress still. Podcast Adwords default. And then if we come back to our Castos dashboard and refresh this page, right. So that's great. So this is showing us that the changes we're making in WordPress, which is kind of where the origin of our feed is syncing over to the Castos dashboard, at least in terms of the podcast that we've created.
Okay.
So that's great. And in terms of kind of nomenclature, I use the term, and we use the term podcast and feed pretty interchangeably, and that's kind of like the grouping under which all of your episodes sit. And so these fields are all of the kind of meta fields that you will find in iTunes. So like the category that it's in, the name, the description, the image, all that kind of stuff. And then the question is, okay, I want to publish an episode. How and where do I do that? And we give you an option because we're, as Jonathan Bossinger, our lead developer, will attest, we're big on options. As the name Seriously Simple Podcasting is true in that it's simple, but we give you a lot of flexibility in that you can publish your podcast basically anywhere you want on your WordPress site. So you can publish it in the podcast custom post type that the plugin creates when you install it, or if you want to publish it in the regular blog area as a post, you certainly can. And so we've enabled that option here. And so what we'll do now is just go and create a new post that will be a podcast episode. And so we'll kind of walk through this pretty real time as far as what creating a post looks like. And then we'll have a real podcast episode after this is done. So we'll call this episode 4, New Hope, right?
Very good.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
And then we'll say like show notes go here. Resources mentioned. There's nothing quite as intimidating as typing live.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, you're doing a good job.
So it's like heading. So I'm pretty well versed in Gutenberg at this point.
As I say, Gutenberg skills on display. Very good.
Mike's Twitter. So these kind of things, right? This is just show notes in the podcasting world are a pretty actionable, concise summary of what's talked about in an episode. So these are typically, 500 words or something like that. You'd have, in this episode, Craig and Nathan talked about blah, 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 and we talk about, the links to people's Twitter handles or websites or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the real magic is, okay, this is a post, and this is just like every other post. But then we have this podcast episodes details meta box down here in which you're able to upload a new file. So I will find my Facts of Life theme song, which is my favorite file to upload for this because it's a great song. And you can see this little progress bar up here says, okay, this file is uploading to the Castos hosting platform. It's now finished because that was a pretty small file and I'm on some pretty good internet here. And you can see now from the URL down here, this file is located on the Castos platform. We have a slug that you choose when you create your Castos account, which is kind of like the home for your podcast files and the podcast website that we create for you. And then this factsoflife.mp3 file. From there, you can do all the regular things you do with a post, like give it a category if you want. So another category. And things like tags.
You are literally now doing what I spend most of my week doing. This is literally what I do with my week.
Yep.
This is so familiar.
Yeah, so featured image, if you want to upload a featured image, you can. We'll just skip that for now. And that's really it. So that's creating a podcast episode, and then we can publish this. And this is so amazing. This has to be JavaScript because it's so fast, because I know it didn't save to the database that fast with Gutenberg. This is just wonderful. And then we can view our post on the front end and get a feel for what this looks like. So we have the title of our episode. The player populates automatically with options to download or play in a new window, as well as to subscribe. So I'll show you kind of where this comes from in a minute. And then the show notes that we put are down here. And if we want to listen to our podcast episode, we can.
We actually can't hear that, but we'll trust that it's working.
Yeah. You take the good, you take the bad. So this is so that's creating a podcast episode. If we go back to editing this post, that really is kind of the all that you need to do as far as creating a post. And that's a whole podcast episode. So it has things like title and a body and the media file. If we go back to the settings area of the podcast area of your site, we touched on this a little bit, that you can enable any type of post to be included in the podcast area. And this is really handy. One of the actually kind of surprises that we have with Castos is we have a lot of folks that use Serious Simple Podcasting and Castos for their church websites. This was one of the surprises for me when we got started with this, is that a lot of churches understandably kind of record their sermons on Sundays and then podcast or republish them as podcast episodes to their congregation during the week. So they might have something like sermons or events or something like that. And so you can just check that box here. We have options for media player locations. So if you have like an archive page on your site that you want to display the player on, you can do that here. I typically think that they're best just on the full content, because an archive page can kind of get pretty busy depending on how it's laid out. And then we have options for, do you want the player to display above or below the content?
Craig, can I just interrupt you? I've had a request for you to hide that little big marker at the bottom of your screen. There's the usual kind of toast warning coming from Chrome. Would it be? Yeah, lovely.
Yep.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. Give me a chance to grab a drink of water too, because
good.
It's a lot of talking. So I'll show one other thing while we're talking about where the player is located. So this is just another podcast episode that I had created before. So some folks say, yeah, I don't want the player to be at the top or at the bottom. I want it to be kind of somewhere in the middle. And so again, we're kind of big on options. So we give you the option here in a short code that is just SS for Seriously Simple Player. And then if we update this post and view it on the front end, this player should be right smack dab in the middle of the post instead of at the top or the bottom.
So it doesn't need any parameters. It doesn't need, for example, the URL. It knows that post, the audio for that particular post is attached to that player.
Yep. Okay. Yep. And that is, I think if we had the resources to build everything in the world we wanted to build, we would have a thing where it could accept parameters. So maybe you could like put the short code on the homepage or something like that.
Yep.
But currently the player is always tied to the post, and so it grabs that media file URL from down here.
Yeah, there are other options if you want a different player, aren't there? And you could grab that URL and put it in a different player should you so wish.
Yep. So, and that's a great point. So if you did want to do that, coming back to the Castos dashboard a little bit here, so we have kind of this default feed that we just published this new episode in. I should have come over here and shown this. But so all of this information syncs over here. And we have the option for you to say, okay, I want to grab this iframe. And then I can put this iframe anywhere in the world, right? On your website, on someone else's website. Say you have you had a guest on your show and you want the guest to then embed this podcast episode somehow on their site. You just come over here, grab that, and give that to them. And then, of course, this is the media file itself. If they have their own player or something like that, that you can give them to embed.
Okay.
So Nathan, you're learning new stuff too, right?
Yeah, I didn't even know that was there. That's a whole new menu. I've never needed to go look for it. So.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, I think most folks find that with the WordPress integration, they spend almost all of their time in the Castos in their WordPress dashboard, and they don't come over to Castos for much at all. And that's kind of how we want things to be.
I log in maybe once a month just to look at the analytics, which I'm sure you'll get to. But I very rarely interact with Castos because it's all done in the plugin, as you say.
Yep. So that's a little bit about the media player location. We have this metadata that was below the player here. So I'll turn this back to the front end so we can see what this looks like. And so you're able to turn these off if you want.
Okay.
And then you're able to customize the player to say like, yeah, I want the background to be white and I want something else to be a different color. So you're able to do that, and then that would reflect on the front end.
Okay.
I won't do that because that would be an ugly color combination. One of the interesting questions that we get from folks is, I already have a podcast and it's on Libsyn or SoundCloud or whatever. This looks great, but migrating all of my podcasts would be a giant pain. And I say it is a giant pain. And we, I think, have solved that in a pretty cool way. So we've built with the implement or the release of the plugin about 2 months ago, we've given full import support right within the plugin. And this is for folks who are using just the plugin without the hosting platform. And that's kind of an important aside, is the Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin is not, it's not mandatory to use the Castos hosting platform. You can use the Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin by itself and host your own files. It's not a good practice or best practice to host those on your WordPress server, but if you have an Amazon S3 bucket or a DigitalOcean Space or whatever, you certainly can use the Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin and host your files somewhere else. And we just kind of have abstracted away that one extra step of uploading your file over here and grabbing the URL and bringing it back into the WordPress site and all that kind of stuff, and built all that into one place. But you certainly could. All that being said, and that's kind of an aside, I'll walk through a bit of importing an external RSS feed into your WordPress site. And so this is an example of if you have a feed from Libsyn or SoundCloud or something like that. And this is an example of our developer, Jonathan Bossinger's RSS feed for his WP Hackercast. I know Jonathan was on the show a while back, Nathan.
Yeah.
So we'll embarrass him here maybe. So I'll just copy the feed URL here and come back into WordPress and say import. And in the import area now we have two options, and it's kind of important to think about the sequence of how these two things work. One is, if you're already using Seriously Simple Podcasting to manage your episodes but not hosting your files on Castos, the top area would kind of apply to you. So the example there would be maybe like Nathan started. He's using Seriously Simple Podcasting but hosting his files on SoundCloud. If he wanted to move all the files from SoundCloud to Castos, it literally is one click. Just say, import my files and go. The other option is if you have been basing your podcast entirely on another platform and you're just building a WordPress site for it, or you don't have all that content in WordPress already, we have the ability to import all that content from an external feed like this. I mean, this is also coming from WordPress, but from a different WordPress site. So say, okay, I want to import this this external RSS feed, and I want to import it as a podcast post type. And I'll say, go begin import now. It says, are you sure you want to import all these?
Really sure?
Whatever.
The SEO
50 episodes or something. Yep. So great, and can see all these episodes that have just come in. And then if we go back over here to the episodes area, we can see this information here. That's great. So Jonathan's WP Hackercast episode 724, and all of these other episodes are here. And then you have this prompt here that says, hey, I see that you have content in your WordPress site that is not live in Castos. Do you want to import that? And if you say, yep, it takes you back to this page we were just on, and we would say, okay, I want to import this content to my WordPress site. So we'll say trigger this, and it says, okay, great. The import is started. Quick. We'll check on this in a little bit because there's 25 episodes.
Okay, it's going to slowly go through that and do its magic. Okay.
Yep. So this would take a little bit because there's 25 episodes. We have to move all those media files over and everything. But one thing that I would point out is, if we look at this episode that we just imported, if the import hasn't gone through to Castos yet, what we should see is, so this is the kind of native file URL from the original location. And then if we look at this later on, we should see that kind of episodes.castos.com media file URL here. And that kind of shows us that the files have been moved over, and then we update the post with a new media file URL location.
So it'll still work even in an interim sort of swapping over process. It's still going to work because it'll use the old URL for the audio until such times as you've grabbed it and put it onto Castos.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
Nice.
One of the other things that a lot of folks, and I probably should have done this before I imported the show here, but a lot of folks ask about running multiple podcasts on a single WordPress site. So say, WP Builds wants to be a podcast network where they have a bunch of different shows, and you want to list them all individually as separate podcasts in iTunes. The plugin and the hosting platform give you the option to do that, and we call in the plugin, we call this series. So we'll call this like our second series. And once you've done this, then you can start creating podcasts under this second series, or this second totally independent podcast that has its own RSS feed and would be its own podcast in iTunes. So this is good if you're really kind of creating an entirely separate show under the same brand that you want it to live in the same website. That's kind of an example of why you would do this. Series can be a bit confusing in terms of nomenclature, because it's not like a series of like 10 episodes that are all themed the same thing. It's a series is a different podcast. So that's just kind of the disclaimer there. And then we can go back to our settings area and say, okay, great, I just created this second series. Let's give it some proper kind of feed details. And so you can see here, we'll edit the series feed. So we'll call this our second.
Whilst you're typing there, can I ask a question? Does this all sit under the one Castos account, or would we be required to have a second a subscription, if you like, for?
Yep. Everything lives under the same Castos account.
Okay.
Yep. So I haven't entered all of the fields here, but I've entered a couple, and we'll see the same kind of reflection, hopefully, in the Castos dashboard when we look at our list of podcasts. That there are now hopefully 3 series or different podcasts. Yep.
Okay.
So that's kind of how you would think about creating a secondary or third or fourth, tertiary, or I don't know what comes after tertiary podcast. And I should have shown the ability to import into a feed, but that's an option when you get here. If you enter that external media file URL, you want to include them as posts or something, and then you can create the series that you want here. Oh, okay. So we should have imported that external thing into a new podcast or new series. I didn't, because this is live and I'm bound to mess something up, but that's a pretty mild thing to mess up. But that's just to show you that when you import stuff, you get a chance to show where that is going to go. And then in turn, those episodes, instead of populating up here on the default feed like they did, because we imported them into that default feed, they would show up down here in this new series we just created.
It does speak to careful planning, though, actually, and probably not thinking about this before you click all those buttons. And this is perfect for that, because it shows us exactly what needs to be thought out. Because I think I've made this mistake, especially in terms of series. I misunderstood that it wasn't, 5 episodes about such and such a topic and 5 episodes about another. I hadn't fully understood that it was a completely separate feed, and I've not needed it, so it didn't really matter. But planning those things out and making sure that you know your way around the platform, as you're showing us, very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. No, I hope it's helpful for everybody. And it does. I mean, podcasting is compared to something like blogging, I think it's more complicated. There's a higher barrier to entry, and I think folks get tripped up or don't ever get started because of that. And they say, "Oh, I need a mic, and I need a this and a that and the other, and editing software and hosting and RSS feeds and all this junk." And unfortunately, a lot of people kind of get tripped up and don't start there. But I think I think if you keep it simple and start and are deliberate and think about the decisions you're making, that it really is pretty straightforward. And just kind of diving and getting started is really helpful.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted. Feel
No,
free
it's
to
okay.
keep going.
Are there any questions at this point? This is kind of a natural breaking point.
There are a couple. One's not so much a question. They're both from Mike. Mike's saying that he thinks changing the nomenclature from series over to channel might be a helpful thing to do.
Yep.
Because I think probably that comes over from television, doesn't it? Where a series is a bunch of programs under the same name, if you know what I mean. You've got a television series and it's one thing, but you can have a second series of the exact same thing. And then he's asked about the future possibility. He says, future possibility, ? Add embed capability to the Castos episode URL. And then he's linked to a Y Combinator blog post, which is called How to Build an embed integration for your startup and why it's necessary. So I think he's asking for you to add something to the roadmap there, in particular, embed.
Yeah, no, for sure, Mike. It is definitely on our list. And embed, for folks that might not know, is where you can just place a media file URL in something like Medium or Twitter or something like that. And when you publish it, it goes and makes a player out of just that URL instead of having to do something like using an iframe embed or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep, it's definitely on our list and something that we know is important for like shareability of podcast episodes. So okay. Yeah, that's a great point.
That's all we've got so far. So again, to those of you that are here, please feel free to add the questions and we'll try to get them answered. If there's any barriers to you, adopting this, or if anything that's confusing you, you've got this one chance. So put some questions in if you feel you need to. Right. Sorry. Let's carry on.
Yeah. No worries. So, one thing that a lot of folks ask about, and Nathan and I were talking about before, and this is kind of getting back to both the Castos dashboard in terms of analytics, but I'll show the WordPress dashboard again, because the plugin comes with a bunch of extensions, as we call them. So the plugin follows the extension model, where there's the core plugin and then there's things that are added on top of that. And so these are things like a stats module that's free, transcripts, where you can embed downloadable transcripts speakers. So if you're in a podcast that usually has like the same kind of round robin group of people in it, you can list those people alongside the player. And then for Genesis themes, there's some tweaks that need to go along with the plugin that we offer this add-on module for. Mm-hmm. And I'll talk about the stats plugin a little bit specifically, because it's kind of the one thing everybody asks about. So we give, and this is a demo site, so there's not a lot of stats here, but this maybe will show you like a bit of kind of what this really looks like. So we give, listens today and this week and last week for either all episodes, or you can pick either a series or an individual episode. And if this was a real website, you would see a big, beautiful graph of a lot of downloads, I'm sure, for kind of whatever kind of time period you're looking at. We also give information about the player. So again, on a regular website, this would have a nice pie chart of 15 or so different players and medium that are that your podcast is being consumed by, and then we give you a breakdown of the last episodes by the last 3 months and lifetime. And this is as of the plugin update that went out yesterday. This is all filterable, so you can say I want to filter this by date or episode name or most popular or something like that. So we give a lot of the stats that come right from WordPress, and this is all kind of like, again, entirely free as part of kind of the plugin and its free extensions. Castos itself, if you're hosting your files on Castos, you get a suite of analytics here as well. This analytics, again, might be a little bare because there's not a lot of action that goes on our demo site like this, but this hopefully gives an idea of the kinds of things that you can expect. So again, this gives you kind of listens over time for all episodes, and then you're able to filter by podcast or series. Again, we use those terms kind of interchangeably. And then if you want to say just for a particular episode, show me that information here. We also show you top episodes, and this is kind of like for the life of the account. What is the total kind of listens count for all of my episodes? and then we give you the same kind of, I'm going to say demographic information, but information about how people are listening. So we talk about by app, and again, if this was a real account, we would show you Overcast and the podcast, the Apple Podcast app, and Stitcher and Google Podcast and things like that here.
I can confirm it works.
Browser,
definitely works. I have it working. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a better example of kind of some data you would see. So by browser, Chrome, other. This is our dev site, so like some interesting dev stuff here. By OS, and again, this is our dev site, so you can appreciate that we have our two developers are both Linux guys. So
yeah, that does not appear on my stats.
Yeah, not mine either. And then we do integrate directly with Spotify. So if your show is on Spotify, you would have Spotify-specific analytics that show up here that show kind of how often your podcast is listened to just on the Spotify platform.
Can I ask a question about that? Because that does puzzle me, because that seems to be the case across all of these, your competitors as well. Why are the Spotify stats extrapolated differently to all the other stats? Is Spotify not allowing you to mix them up with the other options?
Yeah. So the reason is the data comes from different places. So Spotify kind of ingests your podcast feed one time and then redistributes the files from their own platform.
Got it.
Whereas all podcasting platforms, Castos or SoundCloud or Libsyn or whatever, give you data about the usage from their platform in some way or another. And if we were to try to show you listens on Spotify from Castos, you would have one listen per episode.
Is that so that they can do things like inject ads into it and things like that?
I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think maybe the best reason is they want to own the listener experience when it comes to streaming. And Castos is all kind of runs on AWS and everything, so it's a high grade kind of hosting platform. But you can imagine some people that would publish their podcast to Spotify that is hosts on a shared WordPress instance or something like that. That streaming wouldn't be the greatest kind of smooth experience. So that's kind of a walkthrough of our analytics platform, and then wanted to kind of point out a couple of integrations that we have, because I think one particular to the WordPress crowd for sure is our REST API. So we have a full REST API that allows you to do a lot of things to extend the existing functionality of the Castos hosting platform. And on the WordPress site, we use the native WordPress REST API and extend it in some places as well. So for folks out there that kind of like what we're doing but want to do a little bit more, you either can use the Castos-based API if you're wanting to get things like podcast episodes and things like that, or on the WordPress site, able to kind of create and modify posts as you want. And if folks have more questions, I'm not a developer, but if you have any questions about that, just shoot us a message, hello@castos.com. And Jonathan on our team will be able to hop in with answers about.
Jonathan's actually watching this podcast, so he's webinar. So he is there. Whether he's able to answer things, I'm not sure.
It is terrifying. So Spotify, we talked about, is a direct integration for most podcast hosting platforms. So you can see here, none of these podcasts are on Spotify yet, and it's literally just one click. You click this button, it sends it to Spotify. About an hour later, your podcast shows up on that platform. And from a consumer perspective, we're finding that more and more people, especially the younger generations, are listening to podcasts on Spotify instead of through Apple Podcasts or iTunes.
Right.
So if your podcast is not on Spotify, I would get it there quickly. And if you're, so I would get it there quickly. If it's not your deal, I'm not a Spotify listener. I'm not a user, but I know that more and more we're getting a bunch of people that listen to podcasts on Spotify.
Yeah, I had a few people actually write me emails, sort of, well, not complaining, that's the wrong word, but suggesting that unless it was on Spotify, they simply wouldn't be able to listen to it. So they've, Spotify is the only thing that they're listening to, consuming any audio with. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my soapbox a little bit, I think Spotify is turning out to be a bit of the promise that platforms like SoundCloud were previously, where it's a place where you can listen to all the audio. And I mean, they're doing a great job of this in a lot of ways. So, yeah, that's my soapbox. I won't go any further. And there's kind of two other things I wanted to show in terms of extending the built-in functionality of Seriously Simple Podcasting and Castos, and that is two of our integrations, and one is transcription. So we've partnered with Rev, which is a big transcription company, and they've built an AI engine that will transcribe podcast episodes kind of on the fly for you. And so we
really
built this.
Good.
Yeah, it's really good. And I think the big question for folks is about accuracy. And my take on that, as we use this on my podcast, is if you are a clear speaker in a good environment without much of an accent, it's going to be really, really, really accurate. The AI engine will get tripped up on things like proper names and some things like that. And we're actually building in what we call like a custom dictionary soon, to where you'll be able to say, I'm going to put WP Builds in.
Do you know what it never gets right? It's
my last
WordPress. Name. Dang it. It never gets WordPress. Dang it, right?
Oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. Yeah, so we're building a custom dictionary to where you'll be able to put in a list of words that are global for your podcast to say, anytime you hear this word, this is what it is. It's not WordPress in 2 words or whatever. This is what it is. And audio transcription is kind of metered in Castos, and we charge 10 cents a minute, which is what a lot of the other kind of automated transcription services charge.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about this is it's just built in. You can turn it on a single time, and then from there, every time you publish a new episode, it's automatically transcribed.
Where does that because I'm using the service that you're using, but I'm using it from I log into their UI and do it that way. So I'm keen to see where this audio. I don't know if you can show us if you've got a snippet lying around of a few seconds. Yeah, that'd be great.
So I'll show you. So we give the option also to kind of go back and transcribe previous episodes. If you click view episodes here, it gives you a list of the transcribed and the not transcribed episodes. We can come in here and say, okay, I want to transcribe the Facts of Life. And this will take, since the Facts of Life theme song is only a few minutes, this will take just a few seconds probably, and then we'll get a little pop-up here in the window that says, hey, your thing has been transcribed. Click here to check it out. And Nathan, where it will take us is into the podcast episode kind of details page.
Okay.
Where you would have things like the title of the episode and the show notes, and if you were using Castos instead of your WordPress site to upload the file, where you would upload the file. It's basically in Castos where you create a new post equivalent to have like title and episode and featured image and all that kind of stuff. We have another field for transcription. So it's, okay, great, transcription is complete. Let's check this episode. And this is really the magic of live webinaring to see how good this is. Okay, so this is not bad. So it has some music here, and it says you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the Facts of Life. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so as you can see here, it gives you kind of speaker 0, speaker 1, speaker 2. It gives you a little timestamp here. And then this would be like really long for a regular podcast episode. And then if you want, you can say, okay, great, I want to export this as a PDF, and then do things like embed this on my website or put this behind like an email capture or something like that if you would like. And this is all editable. This is a regular text area in the browser here. So
whilst you're typing, the way that I've been doing it is I've been using the exact same service and then copying from a plain text file and then using the meta box, which you're one of the extensions that you offer, the transcription meta box, and just pasting it into there, and it does that works as a sort of a kludge, but this looks like a more streamlined process.
Yeah, I mean, so the streamlining that this would offer you is that instead of uploading your file to the other service and all that kind of stuff, once you save or schedule the post in WordPress, then it would send that file over here, and then it would be automatically transcribed if you're kind of enrolled in the transcription service, and then you would see it.
Yeah.
Again here in this area.
So from a sort of an SEO point of view, plus an accessibility point of view, this is quite useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think SEO is pretty massive. I mean, we look at the length of a lot of shows, show notes, and so probably even like for yours, show notes are something like 500 words. Maybe a page in a Google Doc, something like that. And a transcription for like a 45-minute episode would be about 15 pages.
Yes, it's massive.
Yeah. Which talks, I think, to the allure of podcasting from an efficiency standpoint, is that it is so easy to create what is really a massive amount of content from a webinar like this, or from a podcast episode that's 45 minutes where you're just kind of chatting with someone. It's by far the best use of a lot of people's time. I'll show one other kind of extension that we've built. And we talk about it, I'll go back to our website. We talk about it a little bit on our website, and it is like expanding your podcast reach through republishing your content to YouTube. So YouTube is massive, massive search engine just behind Google, and a place where, again, talking about like the generations and the consumption patterns of different generations. My kids are 7 and 8. And they love YouTube, and they are on it all the time. It's crazy. It's a little scary for me as a parent, but they just want whatever they want right now, and they don't want to have to wait or look anywhere else. And YouTube, honestly, is a place where you can find anything in the world. And that's the part that's a little scary. But for us as podcasters to say, okay, I'm creating this audio content, and it goes to places like Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and Spotify. Wouldn't it be cool if we could just send it to YouTube as well? And so that's what we've done with our YouTube republishing module, is to say on like a one-time basis, you subscribe, and this is a different kind of pricing plan than our base plan. But once you subscribe here, it automatically lets you connect your podcast to a YouTube channel. And I won't go through this authentication, but this is kind of like a one-time OAuth process where you subscribe, or you connect Castos to your YouTube channel and to the playlist of your choice. And from there, you're able to republish your podcast episodes in video format with a static background image, in video format to YouTube every time you publish an episode. And that's for publishing your podcasts via Castos or from WordPress with Serious Simple Podcasting. So basically, once you connect to this and set it up the first time, every time you publish an episode, in addition to going to places like iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play and Stitcher, it also goes to YouTube so folks can find your content there. And we push over things like all the show notes and everything too.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Great.
Yep.
That's lovely.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think that's about all I have.
Yeah, that's okay. You've been speaking for nearly 50 minutes, so I think that's great. There's a couple of questions that have come in. Mike Little has asked a couple of things. The first one is, will there be the ability to map a custom domain or subdomain to the episodes.castos URL? So can we sort of expect that custom domain support, or is it already there?
Not for the media file URL, if that's what Mike is asking.
Okay.
We do have the ability to map, and really this is for folks who are not using WordPress, because for folks who are using WordPress, their WordPress site should be like the place where their podcast lives. But folks who aren't using the WordPress integration or just using Castos, we build podcast pages for them, like a little WordPress site at like, myshow.castos.com, and you can map a domain to that. But that's like your podcast page and not the media file URLs.
The way, forgive me if I'm wrong, the way that I've noticed that it works is you get castos.com/your account name. So in my case, WP builds / and then the name of the actual MP3 file or whatever it might be.
Yep.
So to some extent, there's a little bit of customization there because your account name is in there and you can make that what you like. But no, it isn't WP builds or rather, audio.wpbuilds.com / whatever. Does that answer the question, Mike? I don't know if it does or not, but he does have a further question whilst he's contemplating that. He's asking about the possibility in the future of Zapier or Zapier, whichever way you pronounce it, whether that's on the roadmap.
Honestly, that's a good one. That has not come up for us previously. We have the REST API that obviously you can kind of do whatever you want with, but a Zapier integration hasn't really come up yet. So I'd love to hear, Mike, what kinds of things you would want to do with that for sure, because we use Zapier a lot. And if you have things that you would like to do with your podcast there, we'd love to see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the answer is no. It's not.
No.
It's not being integrated. It's not yet considered. But yeah, maybe if you could, I don't know if you feel comfortable dropping your email address into the chat or just speaking it out loud, Craig. That might be useful. Yeah, just shove it in there. There we go. And whilst you're doing that. Okay, so Mike
sharing my screen now.
No, that's probably a good idea. Then we don't get the recursive video just backwards and backwards. Mike said, yeah, it would be useful to send it to things like Twitter, Buffer, and so on, emails and whatnot. Okay, so there's the form that you can use, Mike, if you wanted to reach out to Craig to ask him. And Tom has said. You might need to put your screen back on. Tom Jackson has said, can you show the other feed options to other platforms like Radio Public, iHeart, etc.?
Yep. So I'll just touch on two things I just put in the chat here. One is our feedback hub. So feedback.castos.com has a forum where you can suggest and other folks can upvote new features. So for things like Zapier integration or OEmbed, things like that, Mike, if you would like to post them there, you certainly can. And additionally, for kind of reaching out to us, just hello@castos.com. I am in the inbox there all day, and we'll definitely get back to you right away with any kind of questions or insights or clarifications you have there.
Okay, let me go through Tom's question again because it's probably maybe not so easy to remember. Can you show the other feed options to other platforms like Radio Public, iHeart, etc.?
I cannot because currently we don't integrate with those kind of platforms.
Okay, yep. So it's basically just to Castos. Castos, and that's what you get. Just from my point of view, the workflow that I had was really like it felt good at the time. I was using SoundCloud, and then I was sending that off to FeedBurner, and then FeedBurner was going off to iTunes and going off to wherever else, and that all felt good until I can't remember who recommended this, but anyway, got the recommendation, tried it, and it's like. Basically, it saves you about 15 minutes of mindless copying and pasting of stuff and the need to duplicate things. So just from that point of view, as I'm putting out at least 2 episodes a week, it's saving me in the order of, hours every month. And just from that point of view, I think it's worth it. Plus, I love WordPress. I love everything to do with WordPress, and having it all in one place where I can manipulate what's coming out the other end is fabulous. And, being able to use the familiar interface to edit and all of that just makes absolute sense to me. And with that sort of ringing endorsement, I will put that offer out one more time. So Craig has said, if you click that button, the buy now button, and use that code, which you can see in the picture there, then he's going to offer you 50% off. And I worked out that if you go for the basic plan, I think it was $19 per month, so $9.50 I'm guessing it'll come out as, if my maths is good. And why not? It's pretty good. You've got a few minutes if you wish to ask any more questions. I might put my camera back on just so that I don't Yeah, here I am. I'm still here.
Sure.
If you've got anything you want to ask, that's fine. If not, if we don't get any questions within the next minute, we'll just sort of say thank you for showing us around. Feel free, by the way, although I can't claim to be like a power user of it, I certainly have used it for well over 2 years now, at least twice a week. So if you've got any questions, then feel free to hit me up in our Facebook group or whatever, and I'll try to answer them. And obviously we've got Jonathan in the chat as well, Jonathan Bossinger. He's one of the guys that works with Craig putting this stuff out, and so I can imagine he's now literally biting his fingers as you say, "Oh yeah, we'll look into Zapier." Yeah,
he's like, next week, I promise.
Yeah, by next week. Right.
No, I mean, on that point, we love feedback and suggestions like Zapier and in integrations options like Radio Public and iHeart and things like that, because we think we have a good idea of what the platform needs to be and where our development resources should go, but that doesn't really matter, because what matters is what folks like you want. So things like feedback.castos.com or sending us an email saying, hey, when and if can you guys do this, is wonderful. So please, if you don't see it or don't understand something, please let us know, because we'd love to help out.
What's interesting to me is I've recently started doing a second WordPress podcast, which is just not related to WP Builds at all, and they're using a different third-party platform, which is specifically for podcasting. And it's fabulous. If you know nothing about WordPress, it would be an ideal solution. But I'm back to that copying and pasting thing, and I have realized the merit of Castos over that. If you're a WordPress user, there is genuine time to be saved, and it's great. Right, it sounds like there's no more questions. So what's going to happen now is I'm just going to end the webinar. Let me see if I can figure out exactly how to do that. No, I'm not. I'm going to stop the recording first. So let me go and do
Thanks,
that.
everyone.
There we go. Yeah, thank you for coming. I'll stop the recording, and then I'm going to end the webinar. You will be booted out to a deals page, a WP Builds deal page. And sorry about that. I forgot to change that. It's got nothing to do with Castos. But yeah, anyway, have a